What is the therapy? The therapy is the situation when we assume that we know a lot and that we are the main agents of the change. But in reality, if you look at the real internal life of my finger, the events that are happening in that finger, like it's the chemical reactions, the formations and like splits of all the molecules and all the flows and everything else that happens there, their responses are going to say 1 billionth of a second. So in that minute that I have been banging on it, inside it, right, it's like 60 billion seconds which have passed, right? 60 billion elementary events. It's a huge number. It's like 3,000 years, right? So, 1 billion seconds for us, if we say that, 1 billion, 1 second is like meaningful event. So 1 billion seconds for us is 300 years, right? So it's just to make you feel the scale, because people, everywhere you hear about this nanotechnology, nano events, and so on. What is nano, right? Nano is 1 billionth. But this nano actually means the things which are happening inside so much faster. So if we are bringing them back to our own scale, we have to understand that it's like the same thing, one event in 300 years. That's what we can do. If we influence it for a second, it's like one event that happens in our life in 300 years. So expecting that we can be therapists, right? Therapists, people who think, decide and say, oh, I'm going to micromanage this chain of events. I'm going to bring this particular molecule here and this particular molecule here and this thing. It's nonsense. It's nonsense, it's delusional. That's very important to understand that actually everything that happens inside, that is happening inside, it's the self-organization. And what we can influence is kind of, let's say, the cosmic climate, right? The cosmic climate, I'm saying the climate for the seeds, right? Or the cosmic climate means that, for instance, if there's a, like the sun in respect to the earth creates a cosmic climate, right? So if the radiation of the sun was 2-3 degrees higher, right, on average, that would be disasters on earth, right? If the radiation would be 2-3 degrees lower, that would be also disasters on earth. So it's just this radiation, the way that it sort of emits the light towards us and so on, and the heat. So basically that's what influences what's happening inside, right? But it's not that the sun heals the earth, right? It's the things which are happening internally, they are happening internally. They have their own cadence, they have their own pace. So this is self-organization that's happening inside. The same thing. What we do therapeutically, it's like, we can create a better climate or a poor climate. And through this, we can either facilitate the self-healing or make it poor, right? Basically, let it diverge into two different avenues, because some events are faster, some events are slower, right? And basically, when we were talking about the healing of the bones in the previous sections, from Miracle of Healing, whatever, that blog posts from the summer, it was actually about the same thing. Right? Because if that was a bone, right? If that was a bone, and the bone has a sheath, right? Okay, so this sheath is too long, right? But okay, let's make it like this. So there's a bone and there is a sheath. It's dark, but probably good enough to see. So what's happening? The surface connections, right? When the bone is broken, right? The bone is broken. The surface connections, because their linkages, they are stronger. The surface connections, they build much faster. But if you look at the total surface area of the connectivity within the bone, what is it? 95% of the surface area is inside, is in the volume, not in the sheath. And of course this sheath here is very thick, right? So probably I should have taken more like, more like, let me take it, more like a sheet of paper. Right, so if I take a sheet of paper, that will be more accurate. So let's say this is 5% of all the connections, and the yellow part is 95% of the connections. So if the 5%, which, but when the whole thing is interrupted, it's the top 5%, the surface, which is necessary to, which responds first and which restores kind of the primary connectivity. But once it restores the primary connectivity, that's it. Everything else, which is inside, is kind of shielded, because in the beginning, originally, it was formed slowly, kind of from the inside out and so on. But now, there is this sheath, there is this like a covering, the stress shielding effect on the surface, so that once inside, they no longer get the mechanical stimulation. Plus, of course, in the case of the finger, it's the same thing. So what's happening here, it's, the organization which happens at the exposed parts, it forms the layer. But once the layer is formed, the connections which are happening, volumetrically from the inside out, they're respectively, they're being kind of shielded mechanically again by this crust which is formed on the surface. So therefore, my part here, right, I'm not looking for the formation of crust, I'm looking for this crevice, right, for this crevice to start closing, not to close from the top, and then slowly and painfully, with the path and everything else, gradually kind of go lock from it. No, I don't want the surface. I want the whole thing to be closing like a zipper from the inside out, right? And therefore, as I'm closing from the inside out, then even if there is some blood like oozing from the top, I don't really care, because basically I'm already, the information has been, first cleared at the deepest level. So what I'm doing here, I'm not being a therapist for my finger. I'm just facilitating the natural self-healing process. I'm actually creating a situation to bypass some divergences, right? And again, when people talk about the wisdom of Mother Nature and so on, there's no such thing as the wisdom. There is only self-organization. But those self-organizations, they happen at those nano-levels, and when they happen at the nano-level, it's like what you do today, right? If somebody hits you today, you don't know what's going to happen in 300 years, right? It's too historical. So life is happening with this, breakneck speed. So basically, the little events which are happening, they just diverge. So what we can do is to understand this, and from the height of our position, of our time, which is much slower, right? So our personal conscious time is like geological in respect to what's happening internally. And that's where we can actually facilitate and sort of invite and create a climate, to say so, which engages more the self-organization processes, the type of the self-organization processes which is going to be more beneficial in the long run, right? So if the fast processes, they shield, then we want to facilitate, we want to invite, we want to, again, invest into the processes which would be otherwise much more long-term and which would be shielded by the short-term reactions, right? So, and then through this, we are actually able to achieve quite remarkable results. Again, it's not about the wisdom of Mother Nature on the one hand. There's no wisdom, there's only self-organization. On the other hand, there is no demigod, right, therapist who knows everything and who is being the agent of therapy, of treatment or whatever. None of those extremes are true. in reality, if we go from the Mother Nature side, there is no wisdom, there is self-organization. And from the therapist side, there is no micromanagement and kind of knowing the exact causative chain. There is a climate creation which facilitates the structures which are deeper, which are more fundamental, and which have, like normally, that slower self-organization reaction. So that's how you facilitate the self-healing. But again, the driving forces, they are all inside. And that's the same thing which has to be very, very clear, right? When I talk about the thing that ABI is not a therapy, I mean this, that it has this micromanagement of all the events. It's the facilitation of the self-organization of the processes which have normally should have happened much earlier, right? You know, which is kind of this underbaked, the earlier weaknesses. We're just trying to, again, I always say this, where no matter how old is the child, we're addressing the baby inside, right? We're addressing the deepest levels, we're allowing them, you know, we're kind of feeding them in that sense, stimulating them in that sense, allowing them to come up. So again, the driving force there is always, whatever happens, the driving force is always inside. Self-organization. We can create a better climate, or we can create a poor climate. But if we are acting on the assumption that we are therapists who know everything and who can impose their will, we will be punished. I hope this little piece of wisdom, which derives from my inaccuracy in cutting the French baguettes, is going to be helpful for you. Well, I actually decided to record this faster because in a couple of days it will heal and there will be nothing interesting happening. So, I hope this has been useful, and well, I'll probably bring some report in a couple of days from this health and fitness exhibition and whether I would manage to scout over there. And but what I want to say as well, just please expect more from me. I've been silent for half a year, but a lot of discoveries, a lot of kind of reforms are there because, well, I've been sort of looking back, reviewing everything because, well, May officially I count the beginning of my career in this field from May 1994. That's when the first time when I had any kind of valuable insight, and when I would say, and I told myself, okay, now I'm in this field of the therapy, rehabilitation, fitness, and so on, right? So it's 20 years. So I had to take some sabbatical and actually zoom in and rearrange everything. And very much we'll be talking about the new reincarnation of the AVR, but that will happen in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, because now after this exhibition I'm going to Canada, so I'm going to present these new findings and versions to all the AVR centers who are going to come for the meeting there. And afterwards I'll be sharing this in detail with you. Okay, thank you very much for my attention, and be very, very safe, right? Be very attentive, and when you cut the bread, don't follow my mistakes.